What is up, YouTube? You're with Budgetmonk, and welcome to a different video here on my channel where I'm basically trying to announce my multiplayer games, upcoming multiplayer games. They're actually going to be beginning on this day that I post this video each week, but also I'm going to be doing it 2 days a week. So that will be tomorrow as well. It's not this week when I post a video, but next weekend is when we're going to begin doing it. Now, I have done multiplayers a long time ago in the past, and I did do one somewhat recently. And if you just allow me, guys, to talk briefly about, I don't like certain things about the multiplayer games, and one thing is basically people joining and seeming sort of committed and enthusiastic, but actually being unable to make it the next week, and or for the rest of the multiplayer, once they miss a day, they feel like the game's kind of ruined, right? The other thing is people actually sort of just quitting very easily, like they lose the war and just quitting. It's kind of unfortunate. And lastly, one more thing is gigantic hug boxes of like alliances and people just all jumping on nations and just dumpstering them, right? Like when a nation shows signs of weakness, everybody just, there's very much a stalemate kind of mentality I've noticed in the late game of multiplayers. And when somebody makes a move and goes to war, everybody just jumps on, the nation that looks most vulnerable and just crushes them. These are three things that I really didn't enjoy very much. However, my community has actually been playing multiplayers, some people in the community, among themselves ever since I actually hosted that game, which is really cool. I'm glad they could have sort of met up a bit around me, I suppose. But with that being said, they have approached me with some pretty interesting ideas, and I wanted to share that with you guys. One of my hopes, guys, for a long time I've hoped this, is I feel like in a multiplayer game, there's potentially quite some drama to be had, right? And potentially some devious behavior and interesting, like maybe it's fairly dramatic. So I'd always kind of hoped to do an edited down series of a multiplayer game where maybe like the Grand Land style, like hopefully some of you guys would enjoy, and give me feedback if that sounds like something you're interested in. But either way, what they approached me with, the rules in which they have suggested are actually this. Number one, you can only ally one other player, so no player alliances, and that other player is your partner. So we'll actually be in groups of 2. Now let me just say I plan to roll with a smaller group of players, and if those people can't make it, we might have some people who can sort of sub in for some players if they can't make it, but we'll also consider just canceling the multiplayer rather than just doing the multiplayer on a day and that's sort of dead set. We'll just skip a day if people can't make it, that kind of thing, because of what I said earlier. Now the rules are going to be, you have teams of 2, guys, teams of 2. You cannot ally other players apart from your partner. Now, with that being said, the rules of picking nations is always something interesting with multiplayer games, right? What is the rules? Is there a development limit? Can you play any nation? If people play big, powerful nations, maybe it's OP. Well, the rules will be that you and your partner can only play nations whose capital begins in the same region. Those are the rules. So pretty interesting, guys, because, I mean, Carpathia perhaps on a weaker side of a region, but let's say you play Hungary, that's a pretty strong nation for a multiplayer, while your friend will be forced to play Wallachia. Pretty interesting idea. I like that. And let me just throw it out right off the bat. Some players have reserved combos. And 2 of the most significant and powerful combos, in my opinion, we're looking at Lithuania and the Teutonic Order. That is a team that has been reserved already. And I've got to say, Lithuania is a very powerful nation. They're actually sort of underrated, in my opinion, a hugely powerful nation, one of the more powerful nations in the world, as well as the Teutonic Order. I mean, that is a pretty strong, weak nation, I would say, considering the whole concept is, like I said with Hungary and Wallachia, that if you pick a region, that you're limited to weaker nations. Of course, having the potential to form Prussia, and he's obviously not going to have. I mean, let's be honest, the Teutonic Order just needs to sit here and they can form Prussia, but you know, they obviously want to expand as well. Perhaps Lithuania will, you know, babysit him into expansion into this region at the very least, and he can play tall and form Prussia. I mean, I could see that going off without a hitch, and yeah, he's obviously not going to die anytime soon with Lithuania at his back, so that is a pretty scary combination right there. The other one, the most blatantly OP combo, is actually France and Burgundy. I mean, basically double France. Now, let's talk about the concept a little bit, guys. Obviously, nations spawning in the same region have some issues. Like, let's be honest. I like this idea, and I'm interested in your guys' thoughts, but let's think about Burgundy and France. Like, they're obviously extremely strong. Burgundy is on the verge of becoming a great power in the beginning of the game, and obviously France is. But there are some downsides for them, which is they share trade in Champagne, and Champagne is not overwhelmingly valuable. I'm sure, obviously, they have intentions to probably move to the English Channel, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's quite some cross-contamination, right? Like, technically, if France was in single player or in a multiplayer by himself, he could get the inheritance. There's some conflicting interests here. So, and that's really the charm, I think, of this idea, is that, let's say you play another powerful combo would be Castile-Aragon, but again, they hinder each other quite a bit, right? Castile-Aragon. And for that reason, I think probably Portugal and Castile, or Portugal and Aragon, is actually probably a stronger combo, even though Portugal is probably a weaker nation than both Castile and Aragon, because obviously the player playing Aragon or Castile could easily get their Iberian wedding. But imagine Castile being unable to form Spain and ultimately collect in Genoa because of an Aragon player. There's advantages and disadvantages of playing two powerful nations more often than not, which is pretty cool. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'm just going to be sort of ranting about my thoughts of actually which nations I want to pick. I am going to be beginning in the European region, even though we do have the double French team, the Baltic team out in Eastern Europe, so sort of the Western Europe, Eastern Europe team, and the others are outside of Europe, I believe. Now, with that being said, I'm basically going to rant about some of my thoughts and ideas, and I'm very much also interested if you guys could give me, do you have a genius idea? What do you recommend as a really strong combo, and what approaches do you take, that kind of thing? What do you suggest taking? Now, let's take a look at Italy, guys. If we were to play as Italy, they have huge potential, in my opinion. I mean, they are small nations for sure in Italy. Like, probably Florence is probably the best nation in Genoa, or Genoa themselves, or maybe the Papal State. But I definitely think Florence is the one I'd like to play. And the fact that they, you know, are inside the Genoan region and don't conflict with their friend, who would probably be Venice in the Venetian region, is really, really nice. I mean, think about how weak they would be, guys, right off the bat compared to the double French combo. But at least, I mean, any small gains you make out here are really valuable. Like, really, really valuable. I've played Florence many times before. I think that's a pretty decent option, right? You do need Verona to form Italy. So if you were to do this, I think one nation should probably form Italy. And it's kind of unfortunate because you need, I think, Milan, Mantua, Verona, Modena, and Urbino would probably go to the Florentine player in this case. And then you would probably take them back, the ones inside the Venetian region here, sort of transfer them back over. That would be the intention. But, I mean, you don't have to. You could play as Florence the whole time. But yeah, that's a really interesting one. And yeah, I mean, let's just talk a little bit about some interesting ideas. Some regions are absolutely garbage. Like Anatolia is really bad because the Ottoman capital is in the Balkans. You've got like Karaman, AQ are probably the strongest. Caucasus is out. Pontic Steppe is out. You've got Crimea, Theodoro. I don't think the Urals are out, guys. You could actually play as the Golden Horde Kazan. Not very strong in the grand scheme of things, but as allies, double horde action, pretty interesting. You could probably smash Muscovy when he goes for Novgorod. You are adjacent to the Lithuanian team, but I'm sure the two of you could just completely dominate this theater, and hordes are pretty obnoxious in the beginning of the game, pretty OP. I could see the Great Horde with Kazan at your back, dominating all of this very early, different religions, sharing aggressive expansion, while Kazan, you help Kazan out in this area, jumping in against Muscovy. Interesting idea there, the double horde combo. I'm kind of intrigued by that. Yeah, so these three regions are kind of out. Carpathia, you're basically Wallachia is a subject of Poland. You could play them, but you're basically forced to do Hungary, Wallachia inside of the Carpathian region. I really want to play Austria. I feel like playing Austria, but he doesn't really have anybody powerful to have his back. Obviously, quite some issues sharing Vienna if you were to play Bavaria, considering how weak they are. I think Switzerland more potential in that regard here over in the Champagne region and kind of out of the Austrian hemisphere. However, right next to this very frightening combo, I think Switzerland, Austria, probably not looking so hot. Probably Iberia is a really interesting one. I thought about, for example, a Castile-Portugal game, and you help Portugal expand into this region a little bit into Africa, and he could actually sell you his provinces, isolating Lisbon. So he's smaller, and Europe sucks, right? Then he can move his capital to Africa, and then he could sell you Lisbon. So you could potentially have a super, like you got this stuff for free, right? So you've got a super Spain going on. Yes, Portugal's not the best, but he could actually isolate himself in the New World as he colonizes Brazil. If he's having economic issues, Castile just pays for it. He colonizes Brazil and forms Brazil. Interesting combo there, in my opinion. Yes, one player is going to be very powerful, the other will be weak for the most part, but that player is getting really extra powerful. It doesn't cost aggressive expansion to buy provinces. Interesting concept there. I think the British Isles, it's obviously going to be Scotland and England are the strongest. They are at least in different trading regions, but, ideally the British would just dominate all of this and pull it into the English Channel. Probably epic double colonial game from the Brits and epic sea game, that'd be interesting. One thing, well, I don't want to spoil my ideas, but if you went for colonies, colonies are pretty hard to maintain in multiplayer games, but who knows, maybe none of the other players will be colonizing very much, and you could just dominate all of America or North America and go for an epic naval game where you just defend everything, right? Just have navy everywhere, killing everything at sea. Interesting one. A concern playing England just is, the French would attack you, obviously, and, what do? You can't really stand a chance, and you don't really want to just give them the land for free, so it's a bit awkward there, but you'd probably do that. I feel like Scandinavia is pretty weak, let's be honest. Denmark alone is probably, comparable to a nation like France, except his traditions are pretty bad, his ideas are pretty bad, and then it's only Denmark, Scandinavia, and Norway who begin in this area, so you'd probably want to do Sweden, Denmark, or Sweden, Norway. Not the worst ever, but Norway and Denmark are pretty weak in my opinion, while Sweden has huge potential, but he's also pretty weak in the beginning of the game. And yeah, you'd have trouble maybe by this combo pretty early. The Russian region is a very interesting one, guys. They have massive issues kind of sharing Novgorod, that kind of thing, right on each other's doorstep. Muscovy would have to take Novgorod to form Russia, but technically, assuming you wanted to do that, you could do a Novgorod Russian combo, guys. Double Russia, maybe double Ruskies to combat the double Frenchies. I don't know, but that's an interesting one. You could, of course, just play Ryazan, Muscovy. I'd say Muscovy is stronger than Lithuania, and Ryazan is probably weaker than the Teutonic Order, and has way less potential than the Teutonic Order. But you could maybe make it work. And last of all, I think probably the most intriguing of all regions is the Balkans. Obviously, one nation would play as the Ottomans, and yes, technically, you could play Ottoman Byzantium game, guys. Now, try not to just fill the comments of just like meme comments, like play Byzantium. I mean, what potential do they really have with the Ottomans, guys? Like, Byzantium doesn't really have the strongest ideas ever. A lot of their strength, in my opinion, comes from their mission tree, giving them claim after claim after claim, and the decisions they have and stuff. Like, at least if you have the DLC for the Triumph in Greece, Triumph on the coast, stuff like that, to give them army tradition prestige. Yeah, they're pretty weak. Although this is why I'm talking about this, ranting on, so that you guys can give me suggestions if you have really good ideas. One thing I did consider, for example, is Athens. Technically, because you can't play as an Italian and the Ottomans, right? To be allied to each other as teams, it's one region. But you could play as Athens, or for that matter, Corfu or Naxos, and these three are actually Italians, guys. But I feel like Athens is the most intriguing because the Ottomans could claim this and they could go in and annex Byzantium, right? And you would become their subject. One player becomes the Ottoman subject. Then the Ottomans could give you, through the subjects tab, just all of this region. I feel like the Ottomans could get away with that, right? Personally? Like, he really doesn't lose any trade value here. I mean, Ragusa sucks for him. And yeah, sure, he loses a decent amount of development, but I feel like that's something they could really pull off, and obviously you would be his ally to help him. So the question is that one nation, the Ottomans, kind of comparable to these guys? I think they somewhat are, at least in the beginning of the game. Maybe they'll fall away later on, but yeah, the idea would be that he grants Athens the independence, and Athens would go on to dominate Ragusa. Maybe if Hungary is declining due to the PLC kind of player, expand up into Vienna as much as they could, and ultimately go into Italy, where of course you get reduced aggressive expansion from expanding into your own culture group. They are Italian, and also you core it up incredibly easily. To ultimately form Italy as Orthodox Athens, right? Because you just accept Orthodox, you have accepted Greek culture, so you'd basically have all but these two provinces. That'd be the intention. And the Ottomans would probably feed you this region. It is clay inside of Constantinople, but that's all good. You wouldn't be pulling trade because you're his friend. So I feel like having, forming Italy, having an end node here, or just collecting in Venice, pulling from Ragusa, and that way you don't pull from Constantinople. You kind of create an end node here for the Ottomans that, expand into their culture group out east. I kind of feel like the Mediterranean combo, guys. I mean, is it really top-notch strong? I don't know if it's that strong. But starting as a one-province minor is as a subject, for that matter, is kind of a meme. That would be pretty cool for the memes, to play for the memes. And the Southern European Mediterranean combo, pretty interesting, pretty cool in my opinion. Athenian ideas suck, but you could form Italy, which is not too bad. But maybe the French have kind of boxed you out of one of the provinces like Milan by the time you get over here. I don't know. I really don't know. Give me your thoughts and feedback, guys. Obviously, you could play Albania. The main appeal to Albania is this ruler. I mean, unfortunately, guys, Albania has manpower recovery. Fort defense is pretty good in multiplayer, I think. They have 20% force limit, so numbers. They've got 15% manpower modifier. So those are all interesting and decent, but the only modifier they have to their military is 50% cavalry flanking ability. Pretty weak in my opinion, guys. They are Eastern, meaning they could get steppe nomads, Cossacks, to synergize with that, a cavalry build, but in order to actually obtain some steppe, it seems like a little bit of a liability in my opinion. The Lithuanian player is right here. Yeah, it's a shame. I wish Albania had better ideas. Similarly with Serbia, Serbia has 15% cavalry combat ability and 10% reduced cavalry cost, which similarly would not be so hard in my opinion. They do have 10% morale of armies and 10% infantry combat ability, though, so they are just straight up decent overall. Bosnia sucks, Ragusa sucks, but I mean, Ragusa being a merchant republic is pretty strong in my opinion. Just to be a republic in general is pretty strong in my opinion, at least initially to get ahead. Just spamming a good kind of leader. Not the worst. And these nations, they could like cultural flip. But I'd definitely be interested in your thoughts, guys. I think Corfu actually has decent ideas. They have 20% gallery, 20% galley cost and galley combat ability. You know, not the worst, guys, if you were to form Italy, like, and just protect the Mediterranean with galleys. They've got 20% fort defense also, pretty cool. 10% tax, 10% trade, 25% naval force limit, 10% trade power abroad, cultural conversion cost, and +1 merchant. I mean, no military oriented ideas at all, but like if the Ottomans fed them into Ragusa, they would just be much more affluent, is what I'm trying to say, than, for example, Athens. They are also Italian, so same thing. Maybe in your independence war against Venice, the Ottomans give you this, which is one of the provinces required to form Italy, and you start expanding into the other provinces required to form Italy. Interesting concept. Naxos, same thing, except I'd say he's just a lesser form of Corfu. He actually has very similar-ish but worse ideas. Very weak military also. Navy and economic oriented stuff. That's pretty much it. I'm done renting, guys. Again, this is going to be a week from now when we begin this multiplayer. Most of the players have already been picked and chosen. It's going to be a core group. I'm excited. I would like your guys' feedback clear across the board. Would you be interested in watching highlights that are kind of edited down, but also sort of creating a general story and narrative throughout the course of what happens over the multiplayer sessions? What do you think is the strongest / coolest out of Scandinavia, Russia, Urals, right? The double horde combo, Balkans, Iberia, or the British Isles, or even Italy? I would like to play in Europe, if you cannot tell. And give me your suggestions. Don't be afraid to even, like, if you on my Discord, like, PM me for 6 strategies, what would be strong? Should we just screw it, dude? Should we just go Valahia, Hungary? I mean, I'm a big fan of Hungary. We could probably take advantage of Poland collapsing-ish if the Lithuanians are fighting them over a personal union. For that matter, there is Brandenburg Bohemia available, guys, in northern Germany. I think that's the obvious choice if you're to be up here. Admittedly, that is pretty weak compared to, like, France Burgundy, let's be honest. But, of course, Prussian ideas over here in Brandenburg, and relatively safe because you're the Empire. So obviously, the Teutonic Order Lithuanian combo is probably just a sort of superior version of this, but at least defensively, you would be fine. You're kind of away from this stuff. Obviously, they are, do have these issues where they're both in the Saxon region. But like I said, I think Bohemia may be taking advantage of the Polish being vulnerable due to this situation. And yeah, Brandenburg just sort of slowly expanding, playing tall. That could have decent potential for sure. You'd basically end up with 2 Prussias. Yep, that's it. Interested in your feedback, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you live, or I'll see you in another video.